What drives a man to murder the women who trusted him with their hearts? You wake up next to someone you've loved for 20 years. You make coffee, maybe share a quiet morning moment, exchange the kind of intimate glances that come from 2 decades of shared life. You have no idea that in a few hours, this person, the one you've built your entire adult life around, will put a gun to your head and pull the trigger. Now imagine this. You're a single mother of 2, working hard to build a life for your family. You're 5 months pregnant with a baby boy. Your belly growing round with new life. You're probably thinking about names, about how to tell your daughters they'll have a little brother, about setting up the nursery in your small apartment. You're dating someone new, someone who makes you feel like maybe, just maybe, you found a partner to help you navigate this beautiful, complicated life you're building. You have no idea that this man has just murdered his wife, and that you're... Next, this isn't fiction. This isn't a thriller you can close when it gets too intense. This is what happened to Rebecca Akins and Sindel Roden in Dalton, Georgia, just 2 weeks ago in May 2025. And it's happening to women across America every single day. How many women are dying because we're still calling it domestic violence instead of what it really is? Terrorism in the home. How many more Rebeccas and Zindels will lose their lives before we acknowledge that intimate partner violence is the leading cause of death for women in America? And how many times will we read stories like this and think, that could never happen to me, instead of asking, what can I do to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else? Rebecca Akins was 35 years old when the man she'd loved for 20 years decided her life was worth less than his need for control. Just 2 weeks ago, on May 21, 2025, her 20-year relationship ended not in divorce papers or arguments, but with a gunshot to her head. 20 years. Let that sink in. She was 15 when they got together, a teenager who grew into a woman, alongside Kevin Akins, building what everyone around them probably thought was a stable, long-term relationship. But what does it mean to love someone for 20 years, only to discover they're capable of murder? Her family's GoFundMe page painted the picture of a woman who showed up, to work, to relationships, to life itself. She was reliable, the kind of person whose absence was immediately noticed. When she didn't show up for work for 3 days, her colleagues knew something was wrong. 3 days, that's how long it took for people who cared about her to realize that Rebecca Akins, dependable, consistent Rebecca, had vanished from her normal life. Think about your own life. Who would notice if you disappeared for 3 days? Who cares enough about your daily routine to know when something's wrong? For Rebecca, it was her co-workers. They cared enough to request a welfare check, the kind of intervention that speaks to the connections we build in ordinary life, the way people notice when we're gone. But by the time they acted on their concern, by the time police arrived at her apartment complex on May 23rd, it was too late. Here's what the police report won't tell you. On the morning of May 21st, 2025, Rebecca probably woke up thinking about ordinary things. Maybe she was planning what to make for dinner, or worrying about a project at work, or thinking about weekend plans. She had no idea that Kevin was planning to murder her. She had no idea that their 20-year relationship was about to end, not with an argument or divorce papers, but with a gunshot to her head in her own apartment. The place where she should have been safest became the place where she died. This story gets more devastating. If you want to help save lives by staying informed about stories like this, subscribe. Now, every share, every subscription, every person who learns these warning signs could be the difference between life and death for someone you love. The next 3 minutes will reveal details that could save a life, including your own. Hit subscribe, because silence kills and knowledge saves lives. But here's what nobody knew about Kevin Akins. He was living a double life so calculated and complete that it would make your skin crawl. While Rebecca was going to work every day, Trusting her husband of 20 years, Kevin was maintaining an entirely separate relationship across town. He wasn't just cheating, he was building a second life with Sindel Roden, a single mother who had no idea she was dating a married man. Capable of murder. Think about the level of deception required to pull this off. Think about the lies Kevin told every single day to maintain both relationships. Think about the compartmentalization, the calculated manipulation, the complete disregard for the humanity of both women. Sindel Roden was building something beautiful from the pieces of a complicated life. At 33, just 2 weeks ago, Sindel was that warrior you see every day, a single mother working hard to provide for her 2 daughters while figuring out her own path forward. Her family described her as devoted to her work and working hard as a single mother, trying to navigate and figure out life. Do you see the woman in those words? Do you see the daily heroism of someone who's carrying the world on her shoulders and making it look effortless? Sindel had reached 5 months in her pregnancy. A baby boy was growing inside her, her belly round with the promise of new life and new possibilities. She was probably thinking about baby names, worrying about how to afford another child, planning how to set up a nursery in their small apartment. She was probably feeling that particular joy that comes with being 5 months pregnant. Past the scary first trimester, feeling the baby move, starting to plan seriously for his arrival. The fear mixed with excitement, the way your heart expands to make room for another person to love. What she didn't know was that Kevin Atkins, the man she was dating, the man she'd trusted with news of her pregnancy, the man she probably thought might be a father figure to her children, had just murdered his wife that very morning and was driving toward her apartment with violence on his mind. Here's the chilling part. Kevin had been planning this. This wasn't a moment of rage or a crime, of passion. This was calculated, premeditated murder of 2 women who trusted him completely. May 21st, 2025, started like any other morning in Dalton, Georgia. The sun rose, people made coffee, children got ready for school. Life moved forward in its ordinary rhythm. But in one apartment, Kevin Atkins was about to shatter 2 families forever. Kevin shot Rebecca at close range, intimate, personal, devastating. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of lost control. This was calculated murder, committed by someone who knew exactly where to find her, exactly when she'd be most vulnerable, exactly how to destroy her life in the most brutal way possible. But here's what's even more chilling. After he murdered his wife of 20 years on that May morning, Kevin didn't break down. He didn't call 911. He didn't turn himself in. He got in his car and drove across town to commit his second murder of the day. What kind of man compartmentalizes murder like it's just another item on his to-do list? The surveillance cameras captured Kevin leaving Rebecca's apartment complex in the early morning hours of May 21st. He looked like any other resident heading out for the day, except he'd just committed murder and was driving toward his next victim. Think about this timeline. Think about the cold calculation required to murder someone you've loved for 20 years, then calmly drive across town to murder someone else. What was going through Kevin's mind during that drive? Was he thinking about Rebecca's body cooling in the apartment they might have shared? Was he planning exactly how he'd kill Sindel? Was he already thinking about taking his own life, or did that decision come later? Sindel probably heard his car pull up and felt happy. She probably smiled when she saw him, maybe rushed to the door to let him in. She had no idea she was letting her killer into her home. Kevin found her there, in the space she'd created for herself and her children, where family photos hung on the walls and toys were scattered across the floor. He murdered her in her own home on May 21st, 2025, taking not just her life, but the life of the son she was carrying. 2 lives extinguished in an instant, a family destroyed in the time it takes to pull a trigger. Think about her daughters. Think about children who will grow up without their mother, without the baby brother they'll never get to meet. Think about the Christmas mornings that will be forever changed, the birthdays that will be marked by absence, the milestones their mother will never witness. Then, after murdering a pregnant woman in her own home, Kevin turned the gun on himself. No note, no explanation, no chance for Sindel to fight back, for her family to demand answers, for anyone to understand why she had to die. He chose to die rather than face what he'd done. He chose to leave behind nothing but questions and devastation. For days after the May 21st murders, life went on as normal for everyone who didn't know what Kevin had done. Sindel's father went about his routine, probably thinking about work, family plans, the ordinary concerns of daily life. He just hadn't heard from his daughter in a while. Parents know when something's wrong. There's an instinct that kicks in. When your child, even your adult child, goes quiet for too long, Sindel's father decided to check on her. He drove to her apartment, probably expecting to find her busy with work or tired from chasing her two daughters around. Maybe he was bringing groceries or planning to help with some household task, or just wanted to spend time with his grandchildren. Instead, he walked into a crime scene that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He found his daughter's body alongside Kevin's, the tableau of violence that would answer questions he'd never wanted to ask while raising 1,000 more that would never be answered. In that moment, Sindel's father became an unwitting first responder to his own family's destruction. Imagine making that 911 call. Imagine having to tell a dispatcher that your daughter is dead, that the man who killed her is dead beside her, that your grandchildren are now motherless, and your family is forever changed. Meanwhile, Rebecca's co-workers were growing concerned. 3 days. That's how long it took for them to realize something was wrong and request a welfare check. When officers arrived at her apartment complex on the evening of May 23rd, they were met with silence. No answer at the door, no signs of life. Building. Staff let them inside, where they found Rebecca's body, the gunshot wound to her head telling a story of violence that her family would never fully recover from. Here's the twist nobody wants to talk about. Kevin Atkins didn't just wake up one morning and decide to commit murder. This was the culmination of something, patterns of behavior, warning signs, moments when intervention might have been possible. So why didn't anyone see it coming? Why didn't anyone intervene? And before you answer, before you start thinking about how you would have known, how you would have seen the signs, ask yourself this: how well do you really know the men in your life? How well do you know the men in your friends' lives? How well do you know the men your daughters, your sisters, your co-workers are dating? The fact that Kevin was maintaining relationships with both women speaks to the elaborate deceptions that characterize many abusive situations. Both Rebecca and Sindel trusted him with their lives, literally. Both believed they knew who he was, what he was capable of, whether they were safe with him. Both were wrong, and that miscalculation cost them everything. But here's the question that should keep us all awake at night. How many other women are currently in relationships with men who are capable of murder? How many women are going to bed tonight next to someone who could decide tomorrow that their life is worth less than his need for control? And how many of those women have no idea they're in danger? Here's the most shocking twist of all. This story isn't unique. This story isn't rare. This story is predictable. Every 11 minutes in America, someone calls the police to report domestic violence. Every day, approximately 3 women are murdered by intimate partners. Every month, dozens of women die at the hands of men who claim to love them. But we don't call it terrorism, even though it terrorizes women into staying silent, staying home, staying small. We don't call it an epidemic, even though it kills more women than most diseases we spend billions trying to cure. We don't call it a national emergency, even though it's destroying families and communities across America every single day. In the aftermath of unthinkable loss, Both families were left to grapple with questions that have no answers and grief that has no timeline. They turned to their communities, creating GoFundMe pages that tell stories not just of financial need, but of lives interrupted, of futures stolen, of the practical realities that accompany devastating grief. Sindel's family wrote with raw pain, but a woman who was more than just a victim of this tragedy. They described her as kind, full of life, and a devoted mom doing her best for her girls. The kind of tribute that captures not just who someone was, but who they were in the process of becoming. Sindel was taken from us in a senseless act of violence, they wrote. But how do you make sense of senseless brutality? How do you explain to two little girls that the man their mother was dating murdered her along with their baby brother? They called Kevin's suicide the coward's way out, words that barely contain the rage that accompanies grief when someone takes not just lives, but accountability. He left behind no explanation, no remorse, no opportunity for the families to understand why their loved ones had to die. Just questions that will never be answered, and pain that will never fully heal. Rebecca's family faced their own impossible, a grief, mourning someone while simultaneously trying to understand how the person she'd trusted most in the world could take her life. 20 years of shared history, of building a life together, of believing in someone who ultimately became a killer. The betrayal runs as deep as the loss. How do you process the fact that your daughter spent 20 years loving someone who was capable of murder? Rebecca Atkins was more than Kevin's victim. She was a woman who showed up to work every day, who built relationships with colleagues who cared enough to notice when she was gone, who spent 20 years of her life believing in love and partnership, and the possibility of building something beautiful with another person. Sindel Roden was more than a single mother struggling to make ends meet. She was a woman who was kind, full of life, and a devoted mom doing her best for her girls. She was carrying a baby boy who would never take his first breath, never feel his mother's arms around him, never meet the sisters who might have protected him. Both women deserved to live full lives. Both deserved to be safe with the men they trusted. Both deserved to wake up each morning without fear, to go to sleep each night without wondering if they'd see the sunrise. Instead, they became statistics in America's ongoing epidemic of intimate partner violence. But they don't have to stay statistics. They can become catalysts for change, symbols of the urgent need for action, reminders that behind every number is a human being who deserved so much better. Kevin Akins took their lives. But he doesn't get to define their legacies. That's up to us. Share their story. Remember their names. Save the next woman who needs help. Because Rebecca Atkins and Sindel Roden and the baby boy who died with his mother deserve to be remembered for more than how they died. They deserve to be remembered as the reason we finally decided to do something about the epidemic that's killing women across America. They deserve to be remembered as the moment we stopped looking away. If this story has moved you to action, subscribe now and share it immediately. Every share could save a life. Every conversation could prevent a tragedy. Every resource shared could be the lifeline someone desperately needs. Subscribe to stay informed about cases like this. Knowledge saves lives. Awareness prevents tragedies. Your subscription could be the difference between life and death for someone you love. Rebecca Atkins and Sindel Roden can't be saved, but other women can be if we're brave enough to break the silence and take action. Hit subscribe now. What's your answer? Share this story. Save a life. Stop the silence.